Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens as we give you a good few updates in today's show. We're going to talk a bit about the January transfer window. Daniel Farke got asked a few questions in his press conference today about the January transfer window, so talking about that. We're also going to talk about what injuries are looking like at Leeds United. Nmecha's still looking like he's out. Longstaff's out still, but getting closer. Dan James is still out, and it looks like besides that, we've got a full squad. So quite a decent show to get in today. I'm quite looking forward to it. I'm actually in a really, really good mood. And no one really cares about this, but I was looking today, obviously, Jake Paul's fighting against Andy Joshua. Don't worry, we're not going to talk about it on here. This is a Leeds United fan channel in a roundabout way, so we'll talk about that. But it's crazy, seeing that someone's posted a song that he was doing about 3 years ago, and now he's fighting him. I mean, crikey. Not for me, I don't think. I'm not taking any money to get in the ring with Anthony Joshua. Not just yet, anyway. I'd have him in a few years, I'm sure. Anyway, that is regardless of the point. Let's talk about Leeds United to start with. And let's start by talking about the injury news. So, unfortunately, Lucas Nmecha is unavailable for this one. Yeah, he is still unavailable. Daniel Farke confirmed this in his press conference today. Really frustrating, to be honest with you. I was kind of hoping he'd be back for this one, I've got to be honest, because I do think when we play this 5-3-2 or 3-5-2, or however you want to talk about it, we do usually... Well, I think we just look miles better when we've got Nmecha and DCL up front, in truth. And I think having no Nmecha really does damage the benefit of the 3-5-2. I like the fact that we've got two big strikers bullying centre-halves. I think centre-halves can't deal with it. We talked about it enough on the channel. So I think that's a huge blow for Leeds United. And again, it opens up the idea, do Leeds United now revert back to a 4-3-3? Or should we try stick to the 3-5-2? So we'll talk about that. But I wanted to get the rest of the injury news done, and then we'll talk a bit about that. He also spoke a bit about Sean Longstaff. And he said that Sean Longstaff is back on the grass now, but just doing a bit of individual work, not in team training yet. And it will take a few days in training to allow Sean to be back, basically, in the Leeds United team and working with the Leeds United players and all that sort of jazz. Now, I think this is quite a positive update. And the thing is that the reason I say this positive update is obviously because Sean Longstaff we want back. Naturally, that goes without saying. But the other benefit is timing, because I don't think we're going to need Sean Longstaff, in my personal opinion, for this weekend against Palace, nor do I think we're going to need him against Sunderland. But after we play Sunderland, we play something like 4 matches in like 12 or 11 days, something ridiculous. And in that time period, we are going to need to rotate. I think we play something like the 28th, the 1st, and the 4th, and maybe like the 8th or the 7th. In that time, we're going to need to rotate. We're going to need to rotate the midfield. So if I'm looking at this, and obviously it's what what Daniel Farke and I expect Sean Longstaff to be looking at, I'm looking at going, can you be back for that week? Can you get back for the start of January and be able to feature in some of their matches to allow us to rotate this midfield? Because let's be honest, we know we can't do that. And at this moment in time, when we do that, we have to bring Piroe into the midfield. When we bring Piroe into the midfield, obviously we see a downturn. I don't think he's as good a replacement as a Sean Longstaff is. So I'm hoping, from the updates we got today, it did sound quite positive, and even Daniel Farke looked quite optimised as he was saying it, really. I'm hoping we can get Sean Longstaff back for that period of time, because if he gets back in that team, then we can get some rotation and we don't have to play Tanaka, Stack, or potentially Gruev in that team for that period of time, which would be a huge benefit. And let's be honest, the reason we bought these additional players. So that's a positive, and I think that's very important as well. Jack says, evening Scott, evening to you too, Jack. And Scooby says, evening Scott, fish and chips and the Leeds Lens. Tar. Mate, I can't provide you fish and chips, but what presumably have you got fish chips? Have we got a bit of curry sauce on there? Have we got some mushy peas? What is the question mark? For me, truthfully, an order is normally, you're talking a fish butty for me and a portion of chips. I'm quite basic with that, but very good option, I must say. Anyway, so yeah, that's the update with Sean Longstaff. Anyway, let's move on and talk a bit about the final player, which is, of course, the injured player, which is Dan James. And basically, the update regarding Dan James is that finally we found out that no surgery is going to be required for pieces with it. Interesting. But we found out that Dan James is not going to have any surgery, and therefore will be back a bit quicker. I think it's going to be quite a steady timeline anyway. I think it's like 6 to 10 weeks, something like that, for Dan James. So it's still going to be a while, but obviously the surgery prevents it being a really long time out. The only question mark I've got around this, people, and you guys know if you follow the channel for a while, that I always usually have this question mark regarding no surgery. I sometimes find when you do no surgery, essentially what ends up happening is they come back, they play for a few weeks, and then they get injured again, and eventually you end up having to have the surgery in a few months' time. And sometimes you are just delaying the inevitable with the surgery. Like Reece James has been through this before. I think he's got an issue with his hamstrings. It kept going. He kept going back. Oh, I'll just do this rehabilitation, come back. Then it happened again. And finally, about a year ago, I think he had the actual surgery, and now he's obviously been back fit and playing for the longest amount of time he has in a while. We obviously saw the same with Pascal Struijk as well, where he went down a path of let's just sort of do this rehabilitation rather than having the surgery. Went over and over again. If you remember the first year of Farke, and eventually had to be out for the rest of the season because we ended up having to have the surgery. So I'm hoping that this is just that they're taking the right course of action here, and it's not just a sort of let's rush him back as quick as possible. Let's make sure if we're going to get him back in, well, let's be honest, he's not going to be massively needed. Let's get him having that surgery if he needs it. But obviously, if he doesn't need it, then absolutely fine. I just don't want to be in a position where we're like, why couldn't we just have Dan James back? And obviously, it's because we took the easy option and didn't do the surgery. Anyway, let's move back and talk a bit about sort of where we're going to go with this, because I think the update, obviously, regarding all this injury news is how are Leeds United going to line up? And I think that is the fundamental statement. And truthfully, I've got to be honest with everybody. And you know I'm always honest in the channel, usually own up when I feel like I've made a mistake. My honest feeling is I don't know if we should go to a 4-3-3. I've been literally tossing and turning like a little child in bed who's been sent to his room, deciding sort of, what should we do? Should we go to a 4-3-3 or should we stick to the 5-3-2? And I genuinely can't decide. I think if we're playing away at Palace, I'd definitely be all up for the 5-3-2. Definitely. And I think that would make the decision much easier. But I think because we're at home and Gnonto's come in and done quite well, and obviously I don't think Okafor is fantastic in the number 9 role, it does for me make it slightly interesting where we're going to go with this. The one thing I will say regarding this, and I think this is an absolute apparent, is that whatever decision Daniel Farke makes on if we go 4-3-3 or if we go to a 5-3-2 or a 3-5-2, as I said, however you want to call it, Daniel Farke, whatever call he makes, it has to work. Because if he moves from the 5-3-2 at this point and goes to a 4-3-3 and we don't win, everybody will say, why didn't you do that? And if he doesn't do that and he goes to a 4-3-3, everyone will say, well, in the last few games, we've switched to a 4-3-3 to save the game. And now, now when we've got Nmecha still out and we're going to play Okafor up front, we've still decided to not play the 4-3-3. So I think for Farke, unless he wins, it's basically a lose-lose. I don't think he can win unless we win, if that makes sense. That is the one thing I will say. But I honestly, I'm really stuck on it. I'm interested to see what you guys think. And we have got some comments regarding it. Jack says, if the 3-5-2 continues to be effective, we won't feel effective James being out as much. Be great to have him back ASAP though. Yeah, 100% with James. It'd be nice to have him as soon as possible. But as I said, obviously, if we are playing 3-5-2, it's important. So play Willie in the number 9 role. Yeah, potentially. I still don't think... The thing is, Scooby, is the reason... I understand Gnonto might be a better option maybe in the number 9 role than Okafor. I don't fully agree with that, actually. I think probably Okafor will be better in there. One thing I will say is, though, obviously, Gnonto's probably in better form at this moment in time from the subs appearance you've seen than Okafor. But what I mean by that is we don't have, because Nmecha's out, we don't have 2 physical strikers. And for me, when I've seen the best out of this formation, out of the 3-5-2, it's always been when we've got 2 proper number 9s up there and 2 physical number 9s fundamentally. I think that's what makes the best outcome in the 3-5-2. So I don't think we can play the 3-5-2 its full effectiveness without Nmecha is what I'm trying to say. So that's what makes it really interesting and really difficult. So truthfully, I'm not sure. I think if I had to do it and I had a gun to my head, I would probably just about stick with a 3-5-2. But I honestly am not sure. And what I need to do, by the way, is remember this, that I've thought this, because after the game, if it doesn't go well, I can't lay in on Daniel Farke because truthfully, I wouldn't know what to do either. Now, of course, I'm not paying the big bucks. I'm not paid a few million quid a year to make these calls, thankfully, for all of us lot and for my own entertainment. But yeah, I need to remember that because truthfully, I honestly am not fully sure. Jack says Okafor for me. What's happened? Jack says Okafor for me. Yeah, I think Okafor for me over Gnonto as well, in my opinion, if we are playing the 9 role. But obviously, if you play 4-3, it would allow Gnonto on the right-hand side, which I think's worked in recent weeks. And, of course, it would allow Okafor on the left. The one thing that I will mention regarding this as well is that Daniel Farke did say in his press conference, for the record, that basically... how did he word this? He basically said that the goals, he said, they asked him about sort of the different formations, and he basically said, yes, the 5 obviously has been working, but when we've changed back to it, we've had to change back to a 4-3 in recent weeks to recover situation where we've been losing the game, which is true. Obviously, we were losing in Brentford in the 5-back. We were losing against, of course, Liverpool in the 5-back, and we changed to a 4-3, and it actually worked. So potentially that means he's going to go back to the 4-3, but he didn't make it fully clear, which is good because I don't want him to make it fully clear what is going on. He also talked a bit about Okafor as well, which is important. We'll bring it into this part of the show. And he basically said that, look, obviously he's played in a striker role up at when he played for Salzburg, and I think that's obviously helping him the role at this moment in time. He also, but for me, I've got to be honest, because he obviously basically said that he can play in the number 9 role. As I said, I just don't see it. I think he obviously always looks like he wants to play on the left-hand side. Even when he plays up front, he still drifts to the left-hand side anyway. You saw that with a lot of the best things he did against Brentford, where it's constantly come from almost a left wing position as opposed to a 9 position. So I don't really agree with him, but he did basically say that he can play up front. Anyway, that is the update regarding the sort of injury news and, of course, and of course where we should go with the formation wise. And I basically haven't given you an answer, so hands up, apologies for that one. Anyway, let's move on to Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because he had a bit to say about our boy Calvert-Lewin. I must admit, by the way, Calvert-Lewin has become a player that is now started to hit the wider Premier League fan base, in my opinion. Like I was watching a show today, Pitchside. It's not particularly massively informative, but even then we're getting on the DCL bandwagon, about how he's playing really well and how he's improved this season. And I think that's a microcosm of what actually is going on in the wider public at this moment in time. You score 4 games in a row with someone that has got a pedigree in the Premier League, of Dominic Calvert-Lewin, and you do start to be noticed. But it's funny because like Goodmanson played really well for like the first 5 games, not mentioned by anyone, but DCL starts scoring 4 games, and all of a sudden everyone's talking about it. I think you probably have. Did the Overlap lads talk about it at some point? I think they might have mentioned that Calvert-Lewin's been doing really well, and it's just hit the rest of the whole Premier League sort of wider fan base, which I think is really interesting actually, because obviously goals are going to do that. The only thing I would say is it's quite funny because if you look back at actually the goals that Calvert-Lewin scored, not to take anything away from the lad, but the Man City one, yes, it's good pressing, but it's a bit of a strange goal. Obviously, the Chelsea one is a complete and utter open goal. Like all of us in the chat, my granny has scored that, and she does watch, so hello. And we've also got that's funny because her reaction to that. Anyway, but and also, what's the other one that I was going to say? We had the penalty against Liverpool, and of course we've had the obviously the decent goal that he scored in the most recent game. But what I'm saying is it's not been a peripherally of brilliant goals from Calvert-Lewin. He's scored a penalty, a complete open goal, and a bit of a strange one against Man City, and obviously a really nice header against Brentford. But it's not been a comparison of unbelievable goal scoring, which is quite funny. But, that's regardless. Scooby says, switch to 4-3-3 near the end. Leaves us open to our Achilles heel of conceding goals, but freshens up our flanks and gives us more presence going forward. That is literally where I'm at, Scooby. We're basically on the same wavelength, mate. It's as if I'm eating your fish and chips at this moment in time. We're that close in sort of thinking. No, I agree with you. I that's why I'm so undecided, mate. I think 4-3-3 is beneficial in a lot of comparisons, and I think it's very beneficial in terms of going forward for Leeds United, especially, as I said, a Leeds without Nmecha. But in the same breath, we like the fact that we defend much better in a 5-3-2. We like the fact that ball that was costing us constantly between the sort of left back and left centre back, that was costing us a lot of goals, is now plugged because there's a guy there as well. So it's tricky either way, really. Maybe a benefit of going to that as well is that we're obviously going to match up against that with Crystal Palace. So we're going to match up in terms of they'll have 3 centre backs on the pitch. We'll have 3 centre backs on the pitch as well. So maybe that's a good idea. I'm not so sure. Free header though, good cross, good header, but totally free. Yeah, it was, but it was good movement, I guess. But that's what I mean about Calvert-Lewin. Like, it's just funny that he's getting so much plaudits, and realistically, it's not. It's like it's 4 in a row. But if you look at the actual goals themselves, yeah, you get the idea. Jack says, we'll give DCL some confidence that. Yeah, it will do. It will do. And also, I think all these England shouts will give DCL a lot of confidence as well. But yeah, as you said, the wider public getting involved will be massively important. Anyway, I was going to go back to what Daniel Farke said regarding Dominic Calvert-Lewin. And he basically said, they asked him about how he's managed to keep Dominic Calvert-Lewin fit at Leeds United this season, because obviously he's had his injury problems in the past. And he basically said, we didn't wrap up in cat and wool, and we actually trained him hard. And I thought this was a really interesting quote, actually, because you obviously expect, and I think I remember Eddie Howe talking about this when he had Callum Wilson, where he said that that's what he did. He wrapped him in cotton wool and didn't really train him properly throughout the week, and he only really played matches. And obviously, basically, Daniel Farke is saying the opposite of that. And it's working, isn't it? And I think the proof is in the pudding at this point. Dominic Calvert-Lewin has done a brilliant job of getting himself fit and also getting himself into a place where he's not getting injured all the time. Touch wood. He obviously might get injured at the weekend, but let's hope not, because I think he's a massively important player for us at this moment in time. But I must admit, and I've thought this actually for a while now, and I've probably not said it on the channel, I probably should have done. For all the criticism Daniel Farke gets, if you want one massive positive that he's really, really good at, it's keeping players fit. He's fantastic at keeping players fit. Look at Manor Solomon last year. A player that got injured all the time before he came to Leeds United, barely got injured at all. Even look at Sam Byron, one of the worst injury records you can ever remember. And he managed to keep him fit for a lot of time as well, which is obviously really beneficial to Leeds United. You look this year, Dominic Calvert-Lewin kept him really fit. I don't think he's been injured. Has he been injured once for like one game? But really he's been fit the whole time. Nmecha struggle at times. But Okafor as well, another injured player that we've bought in, who's got a sort of checkered past with injuries that we've actually kept fit. And I actually think this is a massive positive. As I said, we can talk about how many mistakes Farke's made, and that's absolutely fine. But he's obviously doing a good job at this moment in time. And as I said, one thing he's always done since he's been at the football club is he's managed to keep players with, let's be honest, a risky or a poor injury record in the past fit. And that is a massive positive, because it's so important to keep your best players on the pitch. That is as important as anything else you can do in terms of coaching, in my personal opinion. Making sure your best players are playing on the pitch and not sat in a treatment table is so important. So he does deserve massive credit for that, for sure, because whatever he's doing with the fitness staff, it's working well. It's working well. I feel the advantage, I feel the advantage of switching to a 4-3 going forward is near the end of the game. No way tarting all others than 5-3-2. I think what you're saying there is, I think I know what you're saying there. And obviously you're saying that the benefit of the 4-3 in the last few weeks has obviously been that almost players are tired and it's comes to the end of the game, and that's why it's worked. So I'm guessing you're saying you stick with the 5-3-2, which I think you are. I sort of agree with that, which is probably, as I said, why I'm just about leaning to 5-3-2. But truthfully, before the game kicks off, I won't be like swinging for the hills regardless of what he does, if I'm being totally honest. Sebastian says, do you think Leeds will go for Hamer in January? I don't, mate, to be honest. I don't. I wouldn't mind Leeds United going for Hamer. I think he fits a lot of what Leeds United might want in a player in January. I think he offers a creative spark, which we know Leeds United lack. I actually think if you can get him to a fitness level that's high, I think you can get a lot out of Gustavo Hamer as well in terms of a pressing standpoint. I think he's a really hard worker when he's fully fit and fully ready to go almost. So I really like him. I have for a long time, and I actually think he would gel with the Leeds United fans so well. With the way his personality is and way he sort of gives it all on the pitch, I think it would, as I said, he feels like a Leeds United player almost to me in his characteristics. So I like the idea of it, but do I think Leeds United will do it? Probably not. Scooby says, but yeah, he knackered Pascal, and now an indestructible Dan James may need the knife. So definitely double-edged swords. And none of the mentions Paddy. Yeah, no, I agree. But I think for the most part, Scooby, you're always going to get injuries. I mean, some of the injuries I think that Dan James has had, to be fair as well, have always been sort of like, a lot of them have been impact injuries, which obviously Daniel Farke can do nothing about. But in terms of players that have come in with muscle injuries, I think we've done quite well to manage them in Daniel Farke's tenure, in my personal opinion, I must admit. I think that's a fair comment to make, if I'm being honest. Anyway, let's move on from Calvert-Lewin and let's talk a bit about Piroe. Piroe's an interesting one, isn't he? He's an interesting one. But basically, Daniel Farke was asked that do you still basically see a role for Joel Piroe? And he sort of went on the lines of yes, and he was talking about how good of a finisher he was. He still says he's a world-class finisher, etc., which we know he said in the past. But one thing I wanted to pick up what he said about Joel Piroe is we've got to play it in a way that suits us. And he was basically alluding to the fact that Joel Piroe, in the new style that we play, so obviously going long, playing off a big man, he doesn't really fit that, which is something that we've talked about on this channel for a long time, and obviously it's something I sort of passionately agree with. I agree with Farke on this. I don't think he does fit the system. The problem I've got with all this is, though, that then he got asked about sort of selling players and would you be open to selling players, and he said he's got no motivation to sell anyone in January. So in one method, you've told me that Joel Piroe doesn't really fit the system, and then on the other standpoint, he's also said, I don't really want to sell anyone in January. Now, of course, he's not going to say, I really want to sell Joe Pro in January transfer window, in a press conference. Obviously, he's not going to say that. Obviously, he's going to protect his players. But in the same regard, it did feel a bit like, oh, come on. And I think, and for me, again, this just show, what are we doing? Why don't we sell Piroe in January? Daniel Farke has just said in his press conference to everybody, we don't really play in a way that, he doesn't really play in a way that suits us, and we don't really play that way anymore, in a roundabout way. And yet, in the same regard, we're still probably not going to sell Piroe in January. It baffles me. This one, I must admit, it completely baffles me. I don't understand the rationale why we aren't selling Piroe. I haven't seen anything that I agree with at all, really. I just don't understand it. He doesn't fit. Daniel Farke said he doesn't fit. The fact that he's not playing him suggests he doesn't fit as well. He'd be playing if he was so beneficial to this Leeds United team. The fact he isn't doing, and he's basically coming on at this moment for emergency substitute performances if we're losing a game, and he can nick a goal, suggests it all. Get rid of him in January. It's nothing against the guy. He seems like a really nice guy. He's never moaned about being on the bench, which he could have done quite easily. Lots of players do. Salah. So, and obviously Salah's in a different ballpark in terms of what he's done in the career. I get it. All right, I'm just joking. But but I must admit, we've just got to get rid of him. Just get rid of him. I just don't understand the rationale. Anyway, let's get into your guys' comments about this. Not quick enough or strong enough. Fifth choice in a 3-5-2 cash in. Yeah, I agree. I'd even argue that maybe in terms of a personnel for the Premier League, maybe even Harry Gray's ahead of him. So I just don't really get it. I just don't understand it. No one wants Piroe, and if they did, they'd be coming and offering like 2 million. I disagree. This is a player, by the way, that scored 19 goals in the Championship last season, top scorer in the division. No way 6 months later we're only getting 2 million quid for him. I don't think his valuation would be as high as what we'd have got in the summer. I think in the summer you might be looking at 15 million quid. But I still think you'd definitely be... I think there's still clubs that would pay 10 million for Piroe, probably in the Dutch League, maybe even in the Championship, maybe a promotion-pushing club in the Championship would have a punt on Piroe. We know, obviously, when we were buying sort of Joe Piroe, Southampton were really linked with him. Obviously, potentially they might need a striker. Could they go in for him? Potentially. Obviously, in their sort of promotion push as well. I don't understand it. I really don't get it. I think we could get decent money for him. And he's someone that, yes, he's not going to offer us loads in terms of a PSR standpoint, but he's going to offer us a bit. So I don't really get it. Oh, my crikey. We've had that once before, actually, when the camera's fallen off a cliff. That's a bit unfortunate. You can see my wardrobe there as well. And you can now see my hands. Let's move this back across. I need to stop making sure that doesn't happen, because I must admit, it's not probably that good for the camera. Crikey. What a nightmare. We're back anyway. We're so back. Apologies for that. But yeah, what we're talking about before my camera decided to fall. Yeah, Piroe, truthfully, but yeah, we just need to move him on. I agree about with Piroe's comments. The only real plus, I think, is stuff rubs off in training, and obviously his composed finishing is a sharp contrast to the yips that nearly the whole team. Yeah, no, he's a good finisher, Scooby. He's a really good finisher. I think he offers a lot in terms of finishing capacity. But fundamentally, mate, his rest of his game is just not good enough, which is slightly bizarre. Had not so long, but aye, if his last choice, sell. Yeah, I think he probably is. You'd imagine Watkins stuck at Brentford when they got promoted and was just on the bench. You think he wouldn't have gone for a good fee still? You think he would have gone for a good fee still? Watkins wasn't on the bench for Brentford at any point. I don't really... When Watkins went to Villa for 30-odd million pounds, he had a fantastic year at Brentford. They didn't get promoted and they sold him to Villa. That's how that happened. It's still working, yeah. That's fantastic. Although I have decided to crush it in a somewhat way. But thankfully, as I said, it's still going. Anyway, let's move on to the January transfer window as a whole. And let's talk about a few incomings rather than moan about the fact that we're not going to sell Piroe, shall we? And basically, the January transfer window, I said, if anyone is... I'm saying hypothetically. Okay. But yeah, it's sometimes hard to interpret that in terms of just a comment, but fair enough, I get what you mean. Anyway, in terms of the January transfer window and in terms of Leeds United buying players, if you guys remember it, I said something about maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, and I said the reason I think that we'll probably do something in the January transfer window, and the thing that's given me optimism in the January transfer window, is because Daniel Farke hasn't yet come out and said that it's going to be a difficult market for us. He's picky on his transfers, this sort of thing. That's what I said. I said he hadn't come out and said that, so I think we'll do stuff. Unfortunately, in today's press conference, he started to do that. And I basically said he would start, if we're not going to buy anyone in January, or we're going to do limited stuff in January, he would start to throw that in a roundabout way so people get ready for what's actually going to happen. And basically just toss a few like crumbs to the fan base and go and say a few quotes to make us all believe that we're not going to do anything in January. And he's started to do that now, which is slightly disappointing. He's basically come out and said today, it's a difficult market. There's a limited number of available players in the January market. And if you're going to buy a player in January, either they're not in the team that they're currently playing for, and then you've got to build up their fitness levels before they can play in the team, and you've only got 4 months left from January to the end of the season, so you don't always have really much time to integrate them into the team, so you don't get that much effectiveness. Or he said that you end up overpaying for a player who is actually in their current team at this moment in time doing really well. So you either overplay or you get a player that's not ready to go straight away. And that's the problem with the January transfer window. This is bad news, people. This is bad news. This suggests to me that we've basically, what we heard in the summer, which was that we are this close on FFP, is probably true. And I think this probably is true, actually. I thought we were going to do stuff in the window, I must admit, but I never thought we were going to spend loads of money, which I think probably at some point we may have done. And I think that's still the case. I think we're looking at loans. It's obviously got leaked out a bit last week with what the YEP said. Now Daniel Farke is talking about it. This is the start of the bandwagon of what we're going to get going up to this window. Daniel Farke has now been told, in my opinion, start basically throwing breadcrumbs, as I said, that we're not going to buy loads of players in the January transfer window, which is annoying. But I think that's what we're getting to at this moment in time. So, yeah, bit annoying, I must admit. Inzaghi was also not good enough as a football player, and even passed during a rondo, but he always scored as a striker. But I agree that Leeds better sell Piroe. Yeah, I think I understand the comparison in terms of Inzaghi. Obviously, well known for his sort of one-touch finishing. He was just an elite finisher, and that look, Inzaghi had a bit else to his game as well, but he was an elite finisher. I also think Inzaghi was a bit quicker than Piroe as well, and probably a bit physically more capable than Piroe. But I know what you're trying to say. He wasn't a brilliant footballer, and they made him work. I just don't think Piroe worked, I've got to be honest. I feel we'd easily get half of what we paid, up to 3/4, but no play value only falls. Silly not to sell. Yeah, that's what I mean. This is what I mean, Scooby, because the problem is with Piroe is if you don't sell him in January, and let's be honest, he doesn't play from January till the end of the season, he's just going to lose even more value. So I just don't really understand it. Sebastian says, it's a World Cup season, so plenty of players on loan this year. The only question is, what kind of players are available and really interesting? Yeah, I agree. I've said this a few times. The World Cup is a perfect thing for Leeds United in terms of it makes more loan players available because they want to get in the World Cup squad, so they don't want to be at a club where they're not playing, which, as I said, does open up a lot of factors for Leeds United and should be a real positive for Leeds. But as you said, we've got to get someone that works. He also said today, Daniel Farke as well, that he's really picky with the players he wants. But again, for me, that's just throwing the breadcrumbs again that we're not really going to do anything. I still hope we get one or two. I still maintain that we probably should do that, and I still think we might do. I think we'll definitely do one. I'm a bit unsure at two. If I was to guess at this moment in time, I think we do one. He did talk actually about sort of the striker situation, because they basically asked him sort of, when you're playing two up front, is that many strikers enough that we've got at this moment in time? And he said it's nice to have basically different sort of profiles up front. And we've obviously got physical strikers, but it's nice to have maybe someone who can play the number 10 type striker role, which basically is saying that we don't have. I've got to be honest, with for me, if we're going to buy only one player in the January transfer window, for me, it's got to be a physical striker. I think that's our most important position at this moment in time. I think it is the one that allows us to play the formation which we suit for the rest of the team the most. So for me, we've got to go buy a physical striker. And if I can only buy one, that's what I'm doing. But it seemed bizarre to me that if we wanted a number 9, he'd be wanting a sort of maybe that could operate in the number 10 role. I don't really get that, because you've actually kind of got one if you want that in potentially Piroe. You could potentially also play Nonto in there if you really wanted to as well. So I kind of personally disagree with Farke here. I don't think that's the sort of target market we should be going for on a striker. I think if we are going to go anywhere, we should be going for another physical striker, in my personal opinion. Sebastian says, for sure, West Ham, Fulham, Brentford will all be in the market for a few players. Yeah, they definitely will, mate. I actually think, and I've said this, I think I said this maybe yesterday or the day before, I think the January transfer window is bad for Leeds United. This is bad. I would rather the January transfer window not exist, because I think even though we might be able to do upgrades to our squad, I think everybody else with the position they're in with PSR, in terms of, we're talking West Ham's, when we're talking Brentford's, we're talking Fulham's, I think all these teams will be able to do more in the January transfer window than Leeds United will, and upgrade their squad further. So maybe we can improve this much, but they all can improve that much, and that's where and they're getting a more of a benefit than we are. So for me, as I said, I wish it didn't exist, the January transfer window. I don't think it's doing us any favours, and I think we're probably better without it. A cheap backup lump who's all right in the air. Exactly, Scooby. Exactly. Promised David as a physical striker. Yeah, I've seen a few links to David. Obviously, he plays up front for USG. Obviously, the team that Tony Bloom famously owns, doing really well at this moment in time. I don't mind him, and he's like 6'7", so potentially. I don't know much about him, but he's obviously got, I think he's scored quite a few goals, obviously, over in Belgium. So yeah, I think he's not a bad shout, actually. I think he's not a bad shout at all, Sebastian. I agree with Jack, who's also said he's not a bad shout. Anyway, that is the show today. I hope you've all enjoyed it, as always. Oh, no, there's not. It's not the end of the show. We've got one more thing to talk about. What an idiot. I've never done that one before. I didn't want... Perry, he mentioned about Perry as well, but I don't really care about it. He basically said that it's harder... It's something about the fact that it's harder to play as a goalkeeper in the Premier League compared to the league he was playing in before, because you get pressed as a goalkeeper. That's all good, but of course, you don't get pressed on goal kicks. So, you know... And which he also seems to knock out our play as well. But one thing I did want to talk about, and I nearly forgot actually, and I've just reminded myself, is that Oliver Glasner made some interesting comments. And obviously we're playing Crystal Palace this weekend, as you'll obviously know. And he basically said that anyone that plays tonight anyone that starts tonight will not start at the weekend, which is bizarre to say, considering, you know, it basically gives Daniel Farke his starting 11 based on how many senior players they've got available. However, when I looked at the Crystal Palace lineup this evening, I was hoping we'd see a few of their actual players in there. Maybe Guehi, if I was lucky, Chris Richards, etc. Maybe some of them. Adam Wharton, ideally, which would obviously mean he won't play against us. It's not what I've seen. The players that actually play in and around the squad that Crystal Palace have actually started tonight are Jefferson Lerma, Uche, who's obviously since Leeds United, and Devaney, who's obviously the young lad. I think he scored in the Community Shield for them to win it. I think he did. And this is a slight frustration, I must admit, because obviously Palace play tonight and then play again on Saturday. And I thought, wow, what an advantage that is for us. They're going to be absolutely knackered playing on Thursday and then Saturday. But what's ended up happening is he's basically just rested his entire team, which means that actually we're now playing a team that's been rested for what, obviously, all week. So we basically don't have that advantage. And it's almost annoying, because I think actually if the game had been on a Sunday, he wouldn't have rested his entire team, and actually they'd probably gone more full strength in the Conference League today, and then we'd have played it against a tired Crystal Palace team. But because it's been a day early, he hasn't opted to do that. Now, I'm not saying all of the big names would have been playing tonight, but I think more of them would have been playing had we been playing Sunday. So it might have actually been better for Leeds United if we'd have played this game on a Sunday rather than a Saturday. So that's a slight frustration, I must admit. But, you know, it is what it is. The only thing I will mention is that obviously all these players are on the bench. And should I check right now if any of them have come on? Hopefully, I don't know, someone might have a knock and have come off. But I don't think they have. No, they're all still playing. And actually, unfortunately, Palace are actually winning the game as well, which means that they're probably not going to come on as well. But he has got, his bench is stacked. He's got the likes of LaCroix, Guehi, Richards, Mitchell, you name it, Pino. They're all on the bench, but they're not actually playing any football, which is slightly disappointing. Anyway, thanks all for watching, as always. And I will see you tomorrow for the Friday night show, obviously at 8 p.m. Friday night show, as you guys know, favourite show of the week. So stick around for that. It's always a good laugh. Anyway, I shall see you all later, everybody. And bye for now. Bye for now, everybody.